So is Mono Red fast enough? That's the real question.
Yeah, so the other...
Oh, excuse me. We're going to go to table B here. Ben Whites and William Anderson.
This is a matchup I don't believe we've seen today, and it's a pretty interesting one. A mono red mirror you tend to think of as being sort of just explosive and random and fast and stuff like that, but there's sometimes quite a lot of play to it in making sure your answers line up correctly and squeezing as much value out of your cards as possible. The way we have these decks labeled, actually, it looks like Ben White's perhaps has a slightly larger take on the mono red archetype, and I can see that just from the land counts of these players. William Anderson with 21 mountains and Ben White's with 25 lands, so he's definitely more of a big red deck.
Kiss a little longer. Big red here in the hands of Ben White's. But you know what? We still got to play that Goblin Chain Whirler. Take out the Fanatical Firebrand.
Oh yeah, if you have 20 plus mountains in your deck, you're not leaving home without the Chain Whirler.
Wizard's Lightning taking care of the Chain Whirler there. Only one spell left in hand for William.
But yeah, here we can see William Anderson he's basically done already.
Yeah.
His initial rush didn't work. He's out of gas. He's got the low land count deck that's drawn a few too many lands. And Ben White's just in the driver's seat. Is going to start deploying Siege Gang Commanders starting next turn.
Wow. All right, so what does the mid-range mean in this mono-red deck? Siege Gang Commander, we know the answer there. We can see an Arch of Erasca in his hand.
Well, mono red is a fascinating creature in this format because a lot of times what you'll see is the decks be very aggressive in game one and then sideboard into a more controlling version, sometimes bringing in stuff like Treasure Map, Experimental Frenzy, Fight with Fire, Siege Gang Commander. Ben White's has just cut out the middleman and done that straight with his main deck. So he's very much planning to beat opposing aggressive decks. So trying to have an edge in the mono red mirror, be really well prepared for the white weenie decks, and focus more on individual powerful cards that can dominate the game themselves, like Siege Gang Commander, rather than rushing the opponent down with stuff like Viashino Pyromancer and Gitu Lava Runner.
That was a sweet turn, too, for Whites. Played a Direfleet Daredevil and was able to get back a Wizard's Lightning from Anderson's graveyard to take down the Steamkin. And here's Siege Gang Commander.
Yeah, so if you're William Anderson, you're really hoping you have a Goblin Chain Whirler on the top of your library, and if not, I think this game is just about done.
Right, we're going to be able to take care of the Siege Gang Commander there. Ben's got the City's Blessing now as well. Yeah, it's really interesting, the mono-red deck post-sideboard kind of has the ability to transform, like you said, into a completely different deck, and Ben White's has just cut out the middleman here.
Yeah, and that can actually be a major stumbling block, either if you're unfamiliar with the archetype or maybe in the early days of mono-red coming into its own. I'm sure people would sideboard against the game one deck,
right,
bringing in all their fungal infections and Moment of Cravings and their cheap removal, and then they would just get outgunned in the late game by the mono-red deck with Experimental Frenzy and Fight with Fire and Treasure Map.
Speaking of, here is an Experimental Frenzy for William Anderson.
Yeah, so that's actually really good. That's one of the cards that could get him back into this game because he needs to be multi-spelling. He needs to be casting some pretty special cards and probably 2 or 3 in the same turn if he wants to claw back into the game. Experimental Frenzy could allow him to do that.
Trying to get the life bar back on the screen there. There it is. So William Anderson down to 10, Ben White's 15.
And I think what's going through Ben's head is, how do I navigate this game in a way where Goblin Chain Whirler doesn't ruin my day, and if I play too conservatively, can I lose to a different configuration of spells that doesn't involve Goblin Chain Whirler?
Siege Gang Commander here doing a sacrifice in response to that Lightning Bolt. So Anderson will fall down to 8. Rekindling Phoenix is the follow-up play found off the top. You know what the funny thing about Experimental Frenzy is? It just doesn't look so good. but then you play with it and you're like, this card is insane.
It is just a unique and a highly powerful card, and it really has the ability to take over games. It would have taken over that game if William Anderson had had a few more life points to play with, or maybe if he had been fortunate enough to find a Goblin Chain Whirler. But as it is, Ben White's able to close it out. But we'll see. That Experimental Frenzy does seem to be William Anderson's best card in the matchup, and it's one that Benjamin White's does not have access to. So if we're going to see William Anderson take this to game 3, I wouldn't be surprised if Experimental Frenzy is a big player in that.
And here's the card that goes right along with it, Treasure Map from Ben White's here on turn 2. So tell me a little bit about why Treasure Map and Experimental Frenzy are best friends.
We saw Treasure Map as well in Sam Black's white-red control deck. This is just a really nice mid-range card where you can smooth your draw, you can sort of do something proactive in the early turns without it just being some mindless grizzly bear type creature. And then when you transform the Treasure Map, you can either use it for card advantage, that 3 extra cards, sometimes exactly the boost you need to pull ahead and win in the mid-game, or in the case of this big red deck, you could just use it to Banefire or kick Fight with Fire.
Whew, nice. Okay, so nothing yet from William Anderson. Back over to Ben White's here.
Looks like both players with relatively reactive draws, and I do think the red decks are going to look closer to one another now after sideboarding than they did in game 1.
Yeah.
Anderson probably having taken out some of his creatures that might die to opposing Chain Whirlers and brought in the bigger stuff like Fight with Fire, his extra mountain, Rekindling Phoenix.
Ben White's just passed the turn back over to William Anderson, and William does the same. We're going to get a look at the top of the deck here with our map. It's been interesting to watch the mono red deck go through so many different evolutions for so long, actually.
Yeah, we started off seeing Flame of Keld pretty often, but that has been mostly supplanted by Experimental Frenzy. One card that's really fascinating that William Anderson has, Ben White's does not, is Risk Factor.
Ooh, all right. Tough decisions there. Another treasure map for White's. And so we're just going to send this lightning upstairs.
Interesting play from William pointing the Wizard's Lightning at Ben. That indicates to me that either he might be trying to empty his hand for Experimental Frenzy, or maybe he just doesn't want to get too choked on mana.
Viashino Pyromancer, the follow-up play there, will knock White's down to 15. And we're already getting to transform our treasure map into the Cove, coming along with 3 treasure. I remember a treasure map in a red deck at the World Championship last year called Treasure Red.
Absolutely.
All right, we're going to find a land.
Ben Stark a couple standard seasons ago with that innovative treasure map red deck going bigger than the smaller Hazaret fueled red decks.
Double Chain Whirler here for Ben. William will fall to 18. And we're pressing him to have some kind of answer now with both of these creatures in play. One flipped treasure map and another on its way.
And it's worth noting, Maria, that Ben White's has been holding those 2 Siege Gang Commanders
Yeah,
for
I've
a
noticed
long
that.
time, and he's been really conservative with not deploying them. He might think, based on the context of the game, well, William Anderson is playing a slower game. Maybe he's holding Chain Whirlers. Maybe he's brought in Fiery Cannonade. I want to wait and make sure I can get some real value out of these Siege Gang Commanders before I just play into my opponent's hands.
It's a great point. And you mentioned it early, too, with so few plays early on that both players might have kept a really reactive hand. And we see now that that's exactly the case. Lava Coil able to take care of one of Ben's Chain Whirlers. And a pass back. Ben White's on 12, William Anderson 18. Chain whirler hitting on in. Anderson falls to 15 here. And here's Siege Gang. We're going to pull the trigger on one of them for Ben White's. It's not going to live too long. Ooh, Fiery Cannonade is the weapon of choice here for William Anderson. Not before one goblin gets sacrificed. Down to 13. Deals 2 damage to each non-pirate creature. It's funny, because Ben has a couple of pirates in his deck. That Daredevil.
Yeah, it's sort of funny which creatures in Standard you'll randomly look down and find they're a pirate.
Like that monkey.
Which monkey is that?
The Fanatical Firebrand.
Oh, yeah, he's a pirate.
Pirate monkey.
I want to say goblin, maybe goblin monkey pirate.
Let's find out.
The rigging runner is a pirate. The Dire Fleet Daredevil is a pirate.
Yeah, Fanatical Firebrand is a goblin pirate. And a cute one. How can you be scared? Actually, that would be terrifying. All right, we're going to flip our treasure map once again here for Ben White's. So 2 flipped into the cove. Just a ton of treasure on hand, should he need it. And there's Karn. All right. The sad robot enters play for Ben White's.
So really similar to Sam Black's deck that we saw a couple rounds ago, this bigger mid-ranger controlling style red deck featuring treasure map and Karn. Very dedicated to the card advantage, making my land drops type plan, and the nice combo of these treasures with a construct token. Now we have William Anderson facing 6/6 creature that's not trivially easy to beat with a deck full of red burn spells.
Yeah, are we using 2 strikes on it here?
I think he's going
He always to the face.
straight to Ben. I think he's at the point where, you know what, I'm not going to win a long, fair game, so let me try to take my shot and see if I can peel enough burn to finish Ben in the course of a turn or two.
William Anderson playing his cards a little close to the chest here, but Goblin Chain Whirler will knock off another point of damage. Ben White's will fall down to 5. Anderson at 10.
Yep, it should also take a loyalty off Karn. There we go.
Karn goes to 2 loyalty.
And you can see even the pairing of Goblin Chain Whirler and Lava Coil is not enough to take out that construct token.
Wow. All of those treasures playing so nicely with Karn's ability. So we're going to just have to settle for Lava Coiling the Chain Whirler.
So I'm struggling to think of how William can win this game, assuming he's going to be in chump block mode for the construct token. Maybe something like Experimental Frenzy into a blocking creature and then win the next turn.
Yeah, and Ben White's is just getting aggressive here. Shiv and Fire, make another construct, swing in, count them on up. 7.
Attention Magic players.
William Anderson falling to 3. And here is...
Yeah, that's enough goblins, enough treasures to finish off Anderson's life total.
Siege Gang Commander coming on in for the win for Ben White's. 2-0 over William Anderson. Mono red mid-range over mono red aggro. And that was interesting, Reed, to be able to see 2 different flavors of decks with the same mana base.
Yeah, it's true, and that's one of the hallmarks of Standard is even within the archetypes, the colors, the guilds, there's still so much variation in the way that the players can actually construct their decks and sideboard and navigate the games that it makes for quite an interesting format.
You know, a lot of people were talking about Mono Red after the Pro Tour, after we saw that top 8 full of white weenie decks. Is Mono Red the answer? We've got all these Chain Whirlers. I mean, they kept the format scared for a long time. Is this the answer moving forward?
Well, I'm really keeping an eye on Ben Whites and Samuel Black, the way that they have approached this Grand Prix and the White Weenie Menace, and the fact that they have so many of their decisions in common. Of course, Sam Black with a red-white control deck, and Ben White's with just a red control deck or a big red mid-range deck, but both with Treasure Map, both with Karn Sign of Urza, both with a lot of cheap burn. Maybe that's the answer, is just going a little bit bigger and more controlling with the red-based control decks.
All right, let's watch some more Magic here as we wait for our next round to start. Heading on down to game number 2 here. Peter Yeh versus Kevin Jones. Is it Drakes versus Mono Red Aggro?
Boy, a lot of mountains in our feature match area this round.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. We have yet to see any Golgari. Chart, of course, kicking things off for Kevin Jones. Put the Phoenix into the yard, where it wants to be for now. Goblin Chain Whirler from Peter.
The 4 p.m. Legacy. Your pairings for round 1 are being posted at the black gathering point. Once again, players in the 4 p.m. Legacy, your pairings for round 1 are posted at the black gathering point.
Land 3 for Kevin
Please
here.
find your seats.
Looks like we might be opting, and in fact we are. How does Drakes like this matchup, Reed?
You know, that's an excellent question. I recall looking at some numbers. There was a Pro Tour Guilds of Ravnica by the numbers article that went on channelfireball.com recently, and it seemed to me that Is It Drakes had won this matchup most of the time that these decks faced off. But just on paper, it seems like it should be a competitive match that either deck can win. We also saw earlier Justin Cohen win on the Is It Drakes side, but that was a very, very close match that ran on thin margins, and it seemed like it could have gone either way.
So a combination of shocks there to kill the Goblin Chain Whirler. Treasure Map now in play for Peter as well. Kevin Jones, by the way, currently up a game as we enter this Time Walk match, game number 2. So the Drakes have been able to get one off here on the Mono Red Aggro deck so far. 2 cards left in hand for Peter. Steam Vents for Kevin Jones here, and just passes back with 4 mana up.
It does seem like Lava Coil is a really key card on both sides of this matchup, but in particular, from Peter's side, being able to A, exile Arclight Phoenix permanently, and B, take out the Enigma Drakes and Crackling Drakes. I think a lot of these games are going to come down to a key turn where it's, do you have the Lava Coil or do you not have it? And perhaps in the absence of a card like that, it's just difficult for the mono red player to win.
Another Treasure Map here for Peter, and we did see Lava Coil already do its thing on one Arclight Phoenix from Kevin Jones early on this game. 2 Treasure Maps now for Peter, and an Arch of Araska.
So by the way, Peter with yet a third take on mono red. His deck is somewhat in the middle of Ben White's and William Anderson, in the sense that he has a pretty aggressive take in game 1, but he does have access to these Treasure Maps and Experimental Frenzies and goes up on lands after sideboarding. In fact, his post-sideboard configuration looks an awful lot like what Ben White's has brought to the tournament.
All right, Treasure Map, 1 up to 2, 1 to 1. Kevin Jones had a radical idea last turn, but whatever it was, he kept it to himself, just passes back over to Peter. Treasure Map ticks up to 3. Is this the kind of matchup, how do you feel about Treasure Map in this specific matchup, Reed?
I feel great about it. I think, as we mentioned, once you have the Lava Coils and the Fight With Fires after sideboarding, and you don't have to worry about just getting eaten up by a Enigma Drake quickly, then you really want to focus on resilient threats and card advantage. And Treasure Map, it's pretty hard for blue and red color combination to deal with an artifact. So if you can sneak a Treasure Map in underneath permission mana early, and then you have the right answers at the right time, it can give you a big advantage.
All right, this card is going to end up on the bottom after a bunch of thought here from Peter. Flipping over to the Cove, 3 treasure netted. Let's take up our other one, another bottom it looks like.
players counting up the city's blessing here.
Yep, we've got it. The city's blessing comes scooting on in from the side there. I think Karn was the draw there for Peter. Both players currently undefeated here at Grand Prix Milwaukee in round 6. Great start to the day for them. And it's so funny for me for a deck to be called Mono Red Aggro, and this is the current state of the board.
Yeah, it's a very different game plan, and you have to think, did Kevin Jones sideboard thinking he was up against a deck full of 1 and 2 mana creatures, and did Peter Ye think that, well, I'm playing a control game where I want to focus on card advantage and removal spells, and that sort of dichotomy, the players not sideboarding against the correct plan, it makes things really weird sometimes, and it can make a card like Treasure Map just completely run away with things.
There's Sentinel Totem on your screen, played by Peter Ye last turn. When it enters the battlefield, scry 1, you can tap it to exile it and all cards from all graveyards. So I had some friends who were really thinking about this card when Is It Drake's was just kind of like coming really fast out of the blocks. Like, what could you possibly do? What about Sentinel Totem?
Yep. Yeah, so it's not going to be great against the Crackling Drake in particular, but excellent against both Enigma Drake and Arclight Phoenix.
Murmuring Mystic on the table now for Jones. And we're just going to represent our treasure now with a number. 6 treasure for Peter. Direfleet Daredevil now for Peter.
Seems like a waste to represent 6 treasures with a die.
Yeah.
It's like if Scrooge McDuck went and put all his gold coins in the bank. It would be so boring.
Just diving into an empty swimming pool. So sad. Though I don't think diving into a pile of gold would really feel as good as he makes it look.
Sadly, I wouldn't know.
Oh, well, maybe one day, Reed.
Maybe one day.
All right, we're going to sacrifice a treasure here, down to 5 for Peter. I've often said, once I make my first million of, what I'm sure will be many, I'm going to make a pool, and I'm going to call it the mana pool, and it'll be in the shape, of the blue mana symbol. What do you think?
That sounds awesome.
All right, pool party at my place, everybody. Put it on your calendar for probably never. All right, we're going to start making some bird tokens, it looks like, here for Kevin Jones. Just going to decide how we want that to happen. All right, we're going to go back over to his turn and start things off with an opt. In come flying birds.
Murmuring Mystic, an interesting choice for this matchup, as it does seem excellent at face value, but kind of vulnerable to Goblin Chain Whirler.
Oh, sure. That's a good point. Do you think it's worth it?
I don't know. I guess I would say yes, and I'd probably have to get some reps in the matchup before I could make a really informed decision. But I guess if I was playing Is It Drake's, I just found myself in Kevin Jones's position with a Murmuring Mystic in my sideboard, I probably would bring it in.
Crackling Drake here for Jones. Another treasure map for Peter Ye. How much treasure does he need? Trying to decide what to do with this card on top. He's going to bottom it. Sacrifice a treasure, draw a card. Let's do it again. See what we can find. Saw a Runaway Steamkin in hand. And a pass back over to Jones.
Fascinating game. It feels like Peter should be ahead on
Yes.
a lot of these metrics, just with the treasure maps filtering his draws and drawing him extra cards. But it's Kevin Jones with the potent threats on the battlefield. Crackling Drake now crashing in.
Yeah, Peter down to 11 after that attack. And here's another one.
And I wonder,
Oh, excuse me. He's choosing to cast the Murmuring Mystic number 2.
to what extent the threat of permission spells is influencing the way that these players play.
Yeah.
I mean, it seems like Peter, he could have something like Fight with Fire, where he devotes a whole turn, all his mana, sacks some treasures, and tries to wipe Kevin's board. But then what if Kevin Jones has Negate or Syncopate or something like that? So there's a lot to think about from both players, and the incomplete information with both players having 5, 6, 7 cards in hand probably makes this really challenging to navigate.
Yeah, and Peter now has nearly a full grip as well. Infinite mana. Lava Coil was the draw there.
Yep, that was a draw off of Arch of Orazka.
So we're going to be able to take down this Drake potentially. First, we're going to opt. We've now got 3 birds in play.
Wow, so this might be over.
Wow, negate, 5 birds.
Yeah, Peter only has 1 treasure against 6 flying creatures, one of which is a Crackling Drake. It looks like Kevin Jones is going to be the winner here.
Yeah, there's a Shiv and Fire. Take care of the Daredevil Arclight Phoenix 2. And there is the handshake. Kevin Jones takes down this match 2-0. Is it Drake's over mono red aggro? And yeah, we saw 2 of those Murmuring Mystics really making quite a lot of work. A lot of birds there for the opponent to deal with that last round, which is pretty cool. Okay, well, we've got our next round of Magic coming up in just a few minutes here, so don't go anywhere. We'll be right back.